Mohammed Moli made a name for himself with his swift feet and swifter paws. But Reggie could roll like a hedgehog and pounce like a bat. Mohammed Moli made a name for himself with his swift feet and swifter paws. But Reggie could roll like a hedgehog and pounce like a bat. Mohammed Moli made a name for himself with his swift feet and swifter paws. But Reggie could roll like a hedgehog and pounce like a bat. Mohammed Moli made a name for himself with his swift feet and swifter paws. But Reggie could roll like a hedgehog and pounce like a bat. Mohammed Moli made a name for himself with his swift feet and swifter paws. But Reggie could roll like a hedgehog and pounce like a bat. Was as light-footed as any dancer of the Bolshevik ballet, but not nimble enough to overcome King Demolition. Reggie's renown in the arena brought challengers from every corner of the known rantdom. From the cold rivers of the north came the brutal Billy Von Dam. Reggie's renown in the arena brought challengers from every corner of the known rapdom. From the cold rivers of the north came the brutal Billy Von Dam. Bite wasn't enough to stop King Demolition. Reggie wondered if he gained any fans among the beaver folk. The grub-buster armor was Molekind's ingenious defense against even the most vicious grub bites. Reggie wondered how it would stand up to his sword. The grub-buster armor was Molekind's ingenious defense against even the most vicious grub bites. Reggie wondered how it would stand up to his sword. The grub-buster armor was Molekind's ingenious defense against even the most vicious grub bites. Reggie wondered how it would stand up to his sword. Grub Buster armor was Molekind's ingenious defense against even the most vicious grub bites. Reggie wondered how it would stand up to his sword. The Grub Buster armor was Molekind's ingenious defense against even the most vicious grub bites. Reggie wondered how it would stand up to his sword. The Grub Buster armor was Molekind's ingenious defense against even the most vicious grub bites. Reggie wondered how it would stand up to his sword. armor of the Grubbuster suit didn't stand a chance against King Demolition and his trusty sword. Reggie wondered if the moles would make him a Frogbuster suit. This would be a true challenge, unleashing wave upon wave of foes on Reggie. He hoped he had the iron to go the distance. Exhausted, Reggie stood over his defeated foes. He had truly earned his status as a legend of Moletown. He wondered if he preferred glory to duty. suppose Amy wasn't the only Bard who hadn't reappeared. Rex still needed help. The king's chamber smelled of fresh lilac and gooseberries, while the bed glistened with crisp silk sheets. Strangely, a slight breeze blew from behind the bookcase. Rat, half-frog abomination Must have been the work of his father. Reggie wondered whether this was the source of all the undead in the crypts. Another of King Radis's secrets, best kept hidden. The Crimson Keep was playing host to the traveling squirrel folk on their annual pilgrimage to the Bright Fir. They honored the young king with an invite to their Leaf's Fall Festival, the first outsider to be asked to this mysterious gathering in generations. Reggie was greeted by the squirrel guide Zazu at the forest edge. She'd been sent to show the king the way to the festival, a secret path known only by squirrel folk. The forest was not at all what the young king expected. He'd heard the bright fir's golden leaves bathed the entire forest in light. There'd been no mention of these giant mushrooms that made the air heavy with spores. The bright fir's golden light fell on the forest clearing and caravans like an enchantment. The mood, though, was not festive, but worried. Zazu, embarrassed, explained the reason they asked the brave young king here was to plead for his help. The squirrel elder and a priest of the bright fir journeyed to the abandoned glimmer mines to harvest bright moss, and had not returned. With the golden light of the camp behind him, Reggie headed back out into the gloom in search of the mines. Signs were not promising. Outside the glimmer mines were vicious beetles. What had driven them from their cave home? The squirrel folk were in more danger than they knew. The squirrel elder's walking cane, lying abandoned. If he didn't have it, Reggie wondered, how did he carry himself from this place? The rocks of the Glimmer Mines glowed with a blue light unlike anything Reggie had ever seen. Reggie wondered what the moles would make of this place. The squirrel elder's lifeless body lay on the floor, the priest at his side. Before Reggie could approach, he found out why they were trapped here. This was the nest of the Beetle Queen. Approached the still body of the squirrel elder. The squirrel elder rose with a yelp. He'd been entranced from the ritual smoking of extra potent bright moss. Unaware, he almost became the Beetle Queen's snack. Thanking Reggie for the rescue, they headed back to begin the festival. squirrel elder back at the bright fir with a tankard of bright sap in his paw. The festival of Leaf's Fall could finally begin. No sooner had the elder raised his cup into the air to begin his opening speech, came the clattering of wood and smashing of glass. To everyone's horror, a drunken squirrel had knocked over the table with the bright sap. The festival of Leaf's Fall could not continue without the rare and sacred drink. The squirrel elder turned to Reggie, asking if the brave young king would again save their festival and venture into the shrine of the tapped root to collect more bright sap. This market stall sells all sorts of quality goods. A few coins spent here would spruce up the Crimson Keep nicely. In the maze of bright fir roots, the spores were so thick Reggie had to wear his gas mask. Was this infestation the reason the bright firs were dying? The shrine of the tapped root stood before him, but the root looked damaged. Before Reggie could wonder what had done this, he got his answer. A root worm, bloated and enraged by bright sap. Had been banished from these parts for generations. Reggie had a feeling its presence meant something was rotten in the state of bright fur. To Reggie's dismay, the tap was broken. Reggie did not look forward to returning to the Squirrel Elder with no sacred sap and news of rootworms. Though shocked at the news, the Squirrel Elder had an idea. The tap was one of several made in the basement woodsmith workshop of Castle Dray. Perhaps Reggie could look there. Approaching the ruins of Castle Dray, Reggie's whiskers twitched at the familiar stench on the breeze. He refused to believe it, after all he'd done to be rid of them. It could not be. The frog scourge had returned, a pestilence in the sacred forest that could not be allowed to spread. A slapping of webbed feet from the basement. More pond filth waited below, and would soon feel his blade. The frog squatter was none other than General Hack-Hack, no better than a common thief looting supplies. The only thing he'd be taking today is his last breath. The satisfaction of the Frog General dead at his paws, Reggie found the replacement tap. The squirrels would have their sacred sap. Reggie was surprised to find a mole in Bright Fir Forest. The mole was embarrassed. He'd got lost going from Station C-19 to Station 24-7. Reggie sympathized. Those tunnels were a tough route. Lost he may have been, but still enterprising. The mole had armor for sale, if the king had the coin. The mole had heard of this king of rats who traveled the underground, but never believed it was true. Perhaps Reggie knew the tunnels well enough to give him directions. The king barely noticed the journey back to the Bright Fir, dwelling as he was on the return of frog spawn to the ratdom. Where there's a general, an army must be close by. Reggie handed over the tap, but wished he could spare the old squirrel the pain of hearing frogs were in Castle Dray. The squirrel elder could not allow the festival to continue, knowing pond scum squatted in their ancestral home. Reggie did not need to be asked. He knew what needed to be done. Reggie could not believe the frogs had returned after all he had done to be rid of them. Pond scum never learn. As Reggie made his way towards the ruins of Castle Dray, the stench of pond scum once again drifted in on the cool breeze. The familiar scent made him wonder why the frogs had suddenly reappeared in the ratdom. He'd heard tales of the great Castle Dray from his father's whiskers, but it was hard to believe this mushroom-pocked ruin was ever that once proud place. The evil frog spawn had been looting. These frogs believed they could make the central tower a new base, but Reggie would show just how wrong they were. central tower. Whoever was collecting all these supplies would surely be at the top. His lust for revenge was sated, but he would not be satisfied until every frog in his kingdom had croaked their last. Strange crunch beneath his paws. Reggie looked down to see seeds on the floor. Jars of golden bright fir seeds were all around, enough to plant 100 forests. Reggie wondered if the squirrel elder knew they were here. Seems he wasn't the only one here for vengeance. Shield Maiden Yellowtongue was waiting, screaming the name of her fallen brother.